The universe has many ways of making human beings feel small. It has black holes, galaxies, impossible distances, and the deeply unsettling fact that most of it is completely empty, which seems a bit wasteful really. Despite this, we've spent thousands of years staring into it, measuring it, naming things in it, and then getting annoyed when it turns out to be even bigger than we thought it was. It's quite rude, frankly. There should be a point where space says, alright, fair enough, you've got the gist. But it doesn't. It just keeps getting bigger. And somewhere out there, beyond the reaches of common sense, we find Jupiter. A planet so massive, it makes the others look like skittles. Jupiter is what happens when the universe gets carried away and forgets where it put the off switch. And when ancient astrologers looked up and saw this bright, wandering light moving through the heavens, they thought,
"That one looks important."
And to be fair, they had a point. Jupiter is difficult to ignore. It's not a shy planet. It does not hover modestly at the edge of the room, hoping someone will ask about its hobbies. Jupiter has the general manner of someone that hears the phrase small get-together and immediately hires a brass section. So today we look at Jupiter, the biggest, brightest, loudest yes in the old astrological sky. The warm hand on the shoulder, the encouraging voice that leans in far too close and says,
"How about another one? Or three?"
Welcome back to Keepy's Quest. Today it is about 35 degrees in the UK, which I think is about 95 Fahrenheit. I don't know what that's like in your part of the world, but right here in this room it feels like I'm sitting in a Turkish bath. So if I melt into a puddle on the floor, I do apologise. But in any case, today we're continuing our journey around the traditional planets with the great benefic, the king of the gods, the planet of growth, wisdom and good fortune. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jupiter.
Oh, you are lovely. I just want to bounce up and down on you.
He's warm, generous, expansive, and occasionally in urgent need of boundaries.
What are boundaries?
They're like places where you're not supposed to go.
Sounds brilliant. I'll bring sandwiches.
He opens doors, broadens horizons, and reminds us that life can be bigger than the little box we sometimes keep ourselves in. But as we'll see, Jupiter can also overdo things a tad. Because when your whole job is expansion, there is always the danger of expanding straight through the wall and into next door's bathroom. So in this episode, we're going to look at why Jupiter became associated with luck, abundance, and ordering more fries than the table can accommodate. We'll meet the gods and myths gathered around him, put him in a birth chart, look at Jupiter as an actual planet, and then head into Correspondence Corner to see how we might work with his energy in planetary magic. But first, our fool is about to expand his horizons, and possibly his dry cleaning bill.
The Fool's Odyssey. The Fool is continuing his odyssey on the solar system circular toward the next planet.
Is that fairground music I can hear?
Yeah, we're just arriving at Jupiter. Don't go on the roller coaster. It's haunted by a boy who fell off. And keep away from the pirate ship. It's haunted by a murdering pirate. And don't go in the Hall of Mirrors.
Why? Is that haunted as well?
No, you're just ugly. Soon the bus pulls into the car park of a giant fairground.
Are you coming with me this time?
No thanks, last time I ended up with gout. Go and enjoy yourself. The Fool soon finds himself before an enormous and cheerful looking fellow, smiling as though he'd just won the universe in a raffle.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Step right up, little traveller. You've arrived at Jupiter's Grand Fair of Fortune, where everybody wins, everything grows, and nobody has ever regretted a third pudding.
Wow, this place is amazing.
Of course it is. Now come along and try your luck on the Jovian jackpot, where everyone's a winner. Sort of.
Oh, brilliant. How do I play?
Just reach into my box and see what you pull out.
What's this?
You've won a lifetime supply of novelty shoehorns.
Wow, lucky me.
Just give us your address and we'll deliver them every day. Now then, let's have a bite to eat.
Oh, that sounds more like it.
Next, the pair find themselves chatting to an ice cream seller.
How are things going, my good man?
Better than last week. We found a man lying dead, covered in sprinkles. The police think he topped himself.
I'll take a small ice cream, please.
Here you go.
This is a small. It's bigger than me.
You can't have too much of a good thing. Go on, enjoy yourself.
The fool just about manages to work his way through the giant frozen confectionery. Ugh, I feel a bit rough after that.
Come on, let's keep going.
Next, they find themselves at a huge fairground ride.
Welcome to the Great Red Spinner.
Why is it called that?
Because it's great, it's red, and it spins.
Fair enough. Before the fool can object, Jupiter straps him into the ride and sends him spinning around at speeds no sensible person would describe as recreational. Ah! I can see the back of my own head.
Excellent, your horizons are expanding.
So is my breakfast. Eventually, the Great Red Spinner slows to a halt, and the fool staggers off, several shades greener and considerably less enthusiastic. Oh dear, I think I need to make an offering to the god of toilets.
Nonsense, come on, let's do it all again.
No thanks, I don't think I could manage it.
Well done, you have now learned the lesson of Jupiter.
Have I?
Of course, anyone can enjoy a blessing, but wisdom is knowing when to stop. Time to take a break now.
Thank goodness. Can you stamp my bus pass, please?
I certainly can. Let's have it.
You've gone over the lines.
Exactly. Expansion. Now remember, fool, fortune is a wonderful thing, but too much can make you throw up behind a helter-skelter. The trick is knowing when to enjoy the gift and when to stop before the gift suddenly comes back up.
The fool finds his way back to the clapped-out cosmic coach. How did you get on? I definitely expanded. I thought you might. You better sit by the window. Where are we going next? Mars. Is it nice? Depends how you feel about shouting. And so, with the second mark splurged extravagantly across his planetary bus pass, the fool leaves Jupiter's grand fair of fortune behind him as the solar system circular continues towards its next stop. To be continued. The history of Jupiter. Moving back through the mists of time, we once again find ourselves in the company of 1st century wordsmith Marcus Manilius. Now in his time, Jupiter often appears under the name of Jove. Yes, even the king of the gods needed a rebrand before modern times. In Astronomica, Manilius writes, "Here Jove presides in all his pomp and state, and to this ruling fortune trust thy fate." So straight away, Jupiter isn't skulking about in a damp cave wondering where it all went wrong. He's presiding with pomp and state. Manilius links him with rulership, fortune, fate, and the kind of celestial authority that definitely has a reserved parking space. By the time we get to Claudius Ptolemy in the 2nd century, we've evolved to the more recognisable term Jupiter, and as ever, we get a slightly more technical explanation of the planet. Writing in Tetrabiblos, he says Jupiter revolves in an intermediate sphere between the extreme cold of Saturn and the burning heat of Mars, and has consequently a temperate influence. So he's saying that Jupiter sits between the cosmic freezer and the celestial barbecue, so it becomes the planet of balance and warmth. He goes on to say, hence he produces fertilizing breezes. And if that isn't the most Jupiterian phrase in the history of astrology, I don't know what is. Now it's time to move on to Jupiter's angelic entourage, but first we need to stop at the celestial admin desk and collect his official paperwork, because even abundance still requires a Sudoku. Just like Saturn, Jupiter has a planetary square, but naturally Jupiter's is a bit more generous. For this planet we get a 4x4 grid made from the numbers 1 to 16. Each row, column and diagonal adds up to 34, giving us a grand total of 136. The square is then used in later magical traditions to construct sigils and organise some of the names associated with Jupiter's celestial chain of command. So that's the angel, the intelligence and the spirit connected to the planet. Now in this planetary correspondence section, I'm focusing on Sarkiel as the angel of Jupiter, just as we focused on Cassiel for Saturn.
You may also see Zadkiel connected with Jupiter, especially through the sphere of Hesed on the Tree of Life, but that takes us into the broader Kabbalistic framework, and I am desperately trying not to accidentally start the next series halfway through this one. So Sarkiel is commonly associated with Jupiterian themes like blessing, generosity and divine favour, or as it's known in the modern world, the money moon, that brief period of financial stability we experience immediately after taking out a loan. If Saturn's Cassiel had the energy of a quiet monk standing in the rain and contemplating mortality, Sarkiel feels more like a benevolent royal treasurer who's just approved the funding for the party. Next we have Jupiter's intelligence, Jophiel, sometimes spelt Iophiel. Eophiel? Yophiel? Clearly celestial beings are very relaxed about branding consistency. Anyway, in the planetary magic tradition, the intelligence represents the more ordered, guiding and benevolent side of the planet's power. So if Sarkiel is Jupiter's angelic front office, Jophiel is the wise administrator behind the curtain, making sure all that abundance and generosity doesn't turn into a kid's buffet with no adult supervision. And that's important because Jupiter is wonderful, but Jupiter also has a tendency to make everything bigger. So without intelligence, expansion can become excess, and one more slice of cake can turn into a regrettable bathroom incident. Now, as we saw with Saturn, the spirit of a planet is often treated as the rawer, more immediate force of that planetary power. Not necessarily evil, but certainly less refined. If the intelligence is there to organise the power, the spirit is the power itself, already halfway down the motorway with a party hat on. So with his mail, we're dealing with Jupiter in its more direct form. So that's expansion, appetite and confidence. Wonderful things in the right measure, but without the guidance of Jophiel, Jupiterian abundance can quickly become excess. Generosity becomes extravagance, confidence becomes arrogance, and faith becomes blind certainty. Now his mail is also said to influence temperance, sobriety, modesty and justice, which might sound surprisingly well behaved for a planetary spirit, but it does make a kind of sense. Jupiter isn't merely excess and expansion, at its best Jupiter is wise increase. The problem of course is that Jupiter has a very enthusiastic relationship with the phrase, just a little bit more.
The mythology of Jupiter.
Heading all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, the Babylonians associated this planet with Marduk, whose name means bull calf of the sun. He started out as a minor god of farming, but greater things were in store for this particular deity. In the Babylonian epic the Enuma Elish, Marduk slayed the sea goddess Tiamat. With a sword, that is. He didn't give her a fabulous makeover. Anyway, he then created the heavens and the earth from her remains, which is one way to clean up. In any case, this elevated him to the status of supreme deity and patron god of Babylon, so he certainly earned his gold star. Moving over to ancient Egypt, we can see Jupiter on the Dendera zodiac, where he's presented as Horus the Mystery. Now you might be thinking, hang on, we had Horus for Saturn, and you'd be right, because the Dendera planets often use different divine forms or epithets. Saturn appears as Horus the Bull, Mars as Horus the Red, and Jupiter gets the wonderfully dramatic Horus who reveals the mystery, which sounds like he's about to launch a very expensive online course. Let's head to ancient Greece now, where Marduk becomes Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, wielder of the thunderbolt, and the final result of Saturn's catastrophic parenting strategy. If you watched the Saturn episode, you'll know that Kronos was told that one of his children would overthrow him, so naturally he responded by eating them. Perfectly reasonable bit of parenting. However, Zeus escaped this fate. His mother Rhea hid him away in a cave on Crete and gave Kronos a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead. Kronos, being both paranoid and apparently not very good at checking things, swallowed the stone. Zeus grew up, returned to challenge his father, forced Kronos to cough up his swallowed siblings, and led the Olympians in a war against the Titans. After their victory, Zeus and his brothers divided the cosmos between them. Poseidon took the sea, Hades took the underworld, and Zeus took the sky, the Greek gods being strict adherents to the law of Bagzi. When Zeus moves into Rome, he becomes Jupiter or Jove. And while he keeps the thunderbolt, he also becomes much more closely tied to law, oaths, victory and the authority of the state. This is Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the best and greatest, modest, humble, barely worth mentioning really. His great temple on Capitoline Hill stood at the religious and political heart of Rome, and Roman generals celebrated their triumphs in his honour. making Jupiter their divine stamp of approval behind Roman power, public order, victory and expansion. This is why the astrological Jupiter is so much more than good luck. Jupiter is the principle of expansion with meaning, the part of life that opens doors, builds confidence, and gives you the feeling that the universe just handed you a larger cup and said,
Go on, fill it up, treat yourself.
The psychology of Jupiter. Time now to check in with our psychological planetary pundit, Carl Jung. He had a refreshingly good take on Jupiter. In Jung on Astrology, he talks about how the old gods line up with different aspects of our personalities. He says the planets Jupiter, Venus, Mercury and so on were gods, but they were also planets. That they could be both comes from the fact that those old gods were temperaments or constituents in the character of human beings. So psychologically, Jupiter becomes a temperament, a way of feeling, believing and meeting life. And Jung makes this very explicit when he says a jovial temperament is like an exceedingly blue sky, like Jove benevolently smiling, and Jove or Jupiter in an important position on a horoscope indicates a jovial character. Which is a lovely image. Jupiter is a clear blue sky, the smiling god, the jolly person that walks into the room and somehow makes everyone believe that yes, things might actually work out. Now, I don't want to be the fun police, but every temperament has its shadow, and the jovial character can be generous and full of faith, but when Jupiter gets carried away, confidence inflates, appetites expand, and wisdom starts giving drunken motivational speeches to the toaster. This is because Jupiter expands whatever he touches, including waistlines, budgets, and occasionally the truth. But at its best, Jupiter is the inner yes, the widening sky, the confidence to grow beyond the little box we thought we had to live in.
Jupiter in the chart.
So I think we've got Jupiter's temperament mapped out quite well. He's the great benefic, the bringer of opportunity and generosity. But once we put Jupiter into a birth chart, he stops being just a cheerful sky god and becomes something much more personal, the place where life asks us to expand. So let's jump into some of the astrological nuts and bolts. Firstly, Jupiter is considered to be warm and moist. It's difficult to say that with a straight face. Claudius Ptolemy said he therefore at once promotes both warmth and moisture, but owing to the spheres of Mars and the Sun which lie beneath him, his warmth is predominant. So he already sounds a lot more pleasant than cold and dry Saturn. If Saturn is the part of the chart that says,
No, you can't.
Jupiter is the part that says,
Why on earth not?
and thank the gods for that, because without Jupiter we'd never take a chance. He shows us where we want life to become broader, richer, and preferably served with a large side order of chips. In the birth chart, Jupiter can show confidence, opportunity and wisdom, but because Jupiter expands whatever he touches, he can also show excess, exaggeration, and the dangerous assumption that if one glass of wine makes you philosophical, 4 glasses will turn you into Socrates. So when we look at Jupiter in the chart, we're not just asking, where am I lucky? We're also asking, where do I grow? Where do I take chances? And where do I need someone sensible to take the credit card off me? Jupiter traditionally rules Sagittarius and Pisces, which already tells us a lot about how he works. Sagittarius gives us Jupiter looking upward and outward. This is Jupiter as the seeker, the teacher and the philosopher. It's basically Jupiter with a map. Pisces gives us Jupiter in a more inward and mystical form. Here Jupiter expands through compassion, imagination, and the sense that ordinary life is just part of a much bigger ocean. This is Jupiter as the mystic, who can forgive everyone except the person who interrupted their nap. So in Sagittarius, Jupiter expands through the search for truth. In Pisces, Jupiter expands through the surrender into something greater. Which brings us on to Jupiter's essential dignities, which is basically a way of asking how comfortable a planet is in a particular sign. It's a bit like a celestial seating plan. Jupiter is at home in the signs it rules, so that's obviously Sagittarius and Pisces that we were just talking about. Very different signs, but both trying to reach beyond the ordinary limits of life. A planet in exaltation is not at home, but it is treated with respect. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, where his generosity and abundance can become nurturing and emotionally supportive. This is Jupiter as the kindly host, making sure everyone is warm, everyone feels safe, and everyone leaves with leftovers they didn't ask for. A planet in detriment is in the sign opposite its rulership, so it has to work in unfamiliar conditions. Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini and Virgo. In Gemini, Jupiter's big picture wisdom has to deal with questions and 17 tabs open at once. In Virgo, Jupiter's expansive faith has to pass through analysis and caution, which can be very useful, but may occasionally leave the king of the gods being asked to reorganise the thunderbolts. And finally, a planet in fall is opposite its exaltation. Jupiter falls in Capricorn, where his natural urge to expand is forced through Saturn's world of limits, rules and consequences. If Jupiter says, let's build a glorious temple to the heavens, Capricorn asks him to submit a budget by Friday. Now when we look at Jupiter in a birth chart, the sign shows how Jupiter behaves, what style his growth takes. The house shows where that growth tends to play out, whether it's learning, relationships, career and so on. This isn't just good luck or where everything magically works out, it's where we expand and develop faith in life. But it can also show where we tend to overdo things. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some examples.
First, let's look at Jupiter in Cancer, where Jupiter is exalted, which means the great planet of growth, generosity and good fortune has been handed a cardigan, a casserole dish, and a profound emotional attachment to cute mugs. Here, Jupiter expresses himself through home, family, protection and belonging. At its best, this can give warmth, emotional wisdom, and the ability to make people feel safe enough to unfold. But the downside is overdoing the nurturing. Cancer wants to care, while Jupiter wants more of everything. So this can become smothering people with kindness, adopting every wounded soul within a 5-mile radius, or trying to solve all of human suffering with chicken stew.
There's always room for one more at the table.
Lovely, I've made enough food for 12.
How many people are coming?
3, but one of them looked a bit peckish in 2017.
Sounds good to me.
Next we have Jupiter in Virgo, where Jupiter is in detriment, so the king of the gods has now been given a clipboard and a filing system. Here Jupiter expresses himself through service, skill, routines, and the noble dream of improving life by correcting it slightly. At its best, this can give practical wisdom and the ability to turn a grand vision into something that actually works. But the flip side is shrinking Jupiter's big picture into a list of tiny problems. Virgo wants precision, while Jupiter wants expansion, so this can become trying to discover the meaning of life with a colour-coded rota.
I bring wisdom, abundance, and the blessings of the heavens.
Excellent. I've made you a checklist.
For the blessings,
For the heavens. They're a bit untidy.
Now let's take a look at a couple of houses. Jupiter in the second house is all about money, possessions, self-worth, and the things we rely on to feel secure. So here Jupiter can bring generosity and a sense that life is abundant. There may be a natural ability to attract resources, enjoy comfort, and believe that good things are worth having. But Jupiter does like to expand whatever he touches. And in the second house, that can include the shopping basket, the overdraft, and the deeply spiritual conviction that this purchase definitely counts as an investment.
congratulations, you now understand your true value. Unfortunately, so does your credit card company.
Now let's move Jupiter into the 9th house. This place is all about travel, philosophy, higher learning, and the great search for meaning. So here Jupiter is very much at home. This can bring faith, big ideas, and the urge to understand life from the widest possible angle. It can be the placement of the traveller, the teacher, or the person who reads one paragraph of Plato and becomes unbearable for 3 weeks. At its best, Jupiter in the 9th house opens the mind and helps us find meaning beyond the little bubble of everyday life. But the downside is assuming that every big thought is automatically a wise one.
You have glimpsed the bigger picture. Now go and explain it to someone trapped next to you on a train.
So those are just a few examples, but if we didn't cover your placement, fear not. We've got Jupiter going through all 12 signs and houses next week.
Jupiter in the sky.
So far we've looked at the sky god, the temperament and the principle in the birth chart, but now it's time to look at the actual planet. And this is where Jupiter, with enormous Jupiterian modesty, becomes absolutely ridiculous. Jupiter is the 5th planet from the Sun and the largest planet in the solar system. Not by a polite, tasteful amount, Jupiter has more than twice the mass as all the other planets combined, meaning that he's also the king of the weighing scales. But despite being so enormous, Jupiter is spinning like someone has given him too much Red Bull. 1 year on Jupiter takes about 4,329 Earth days. So if you think January drags on here, try waiting for your birthday on Jupiter. Yet one Jupiter day lasts only about 10 hours, which gives it the shortest day of any planet in the solar system. It's also a gas giant, so it doesn't have a solid surface you can have a picnic on. Instead, you would descend through clouds of storms, liquid hydrogen, metallic hydrogen, and eventually into a deep interior that would crush you to the size of a lentil. And then, of course, there's the Great Red Spot. This is a gigantic storm in Jupiter's atmosphere that we've been looking at since 1831. Also, this storm is about 1.3 times the diameter of Earth, so when Jupiter has weather, it really has weather. On Earth, the storm might ruin your barbecue. On Jupiter, the storm could swallow the planet you are having the barbecue on. And as if that wasn't enough, Jupiter has rings. Not big glamorous Saturn rings, Jupiter's rings are faint, dusty and much harder to see, like he brought them off a dodgy website, but they are there, made of a main ring, a halo and a faint gossamer ring. I guess even the largest planet in the solar system looked at Saturn and thought,
Ooh, I'll have a bit of that.
Jupiter is also thought to be the oldest planet in the solar system. Evidence suggests it began forming very early, possibly within the first million years after the Sun, when Earth was still a twinkle in the milkman's eye. Which means that Jupiter was not only the biggest child in the nursery, it was also the first to arrive. And then we have the moons. Jupiter has well over 100, because of course he does. But the most famous are the ones discovered by Galileo in 1610. Io, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto. Io is the most volcanically active world in the solar system. Europa is covered in ice and may have a salty ocean underneath, which makes it another candidate for possible life. Ganymede is the largest moon in the solar system, and Callisto is an ancient battered world covered in craters, looking like it spent several billion years losing arguments with rocks. So astronomically, Jupiter is everything he should be. Huge, fast, stormy, ancient, surrounded by attendants, wearing faint rings he doesn't need, and taking up far more space than is strictly reasonable.
Correspondence Corner!
Now it's time to have a look at those cosmic associations, kicking off with the tarot. Jupiter corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune, which makes perfect sense, because Jupiter isn't just good luck in the sense of finding a tenner in an old coat. It's the principle of opportunity and turning points. The wheel shows life in motion. What rises falls, what falls rises. The wheel turns, fortunes change, and somewhere in the background, Jupiter is looking very pleased with himself, as if this was the plan all along. Which is great when the wheel is lifting you upward, slightly less great when it turns out you were standing on the comedy banana skin of destiny. Moving on to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, Jupiter corresponds to Hesed, the fourth Sephira, whose name means mercy, and that takes us from Jupiter as luck into something much bigger. Hesed is benevolence, generosity and divine order. It's the overflowing kindness of the universe, but also the rule of the wise king. Not just random niceness, but the power that gives, blesses and governs. Dion Fortune describes the magical image of Hesed as a mighty crowned and throned king, which is about as Jupiter as it gets. Big chair, big beard, big benevolence, probably some kind of goblet. In the mystical Kabbalah, she says, from these things we can learn a great deal about Hesed. It is the loving father, the protector and preserver, just as Chokmah is the all-begetter. It continues the work of Chokmah, organising and preserving that which the All-Father has begotten. It balances mercy with the severity of Geburah. So we're talking about mercy with authority behind it, the power that preserves and allows things to flourish. But Fortune also points out that Hesed balances the severity of Geburah, which is important because unlimited mercy can become indulgence. Unlimited generosity can become waste. So Jupiter's place on the Tree of Life shows us his higher function. Not just luck or optimism, but the principle of generous order. Now let's talk about how we can do some planetary magic, and in this case that would be the aim to bring more growth, expansion or opportunity. Now as I've said before, you can be as elaborate with this as you like, but for a simple Jupiter working, we're just talking about creating a space and getting hold of the corresponding bits and pieces. Now when we talk about this kind of thing, we're not just collecting random symbolic objects because occultists enjoy making tables. Although to be fair, occultists absolutely enjoy making tables. These things are here to help focus the mind on an intention, and that could be, I would like to increase my knowledge of something, or I would like to be more generous, or maybe I would like to expand my mobile foot massage business. But as always, this is where we need the sensible occult health warning. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, so be careful what you ask to grow. More money sounds great, until it arrives as more overtime. More opportunity sounds wonderful, until your calendar looks like it's been attacked by wasps. More generosity is brilliant, until you find yourself mowing everybody's lawn. In any case, Thursday would be a good day to do this, as that's Jupiter's day. The traditional colour is blue, partly because of the association to Hesed, but it also fits nicely with Jupiter's expansive sky god quality. So you might use a blue candle, blue tablecloth, or you could just wear something blue. Jupiter's metal is tin, which is admittedly not the most glamorous metal in the occult cupboard, but there we are. Even the king of the gods occasionally has to work with something that beans are kept in. Sage is often associated with Jupiter, so you might want to do some smudging. Keep it away from me though. Being a secret demon means I can't stand the smell. For gemstones, we've got sapphire, lapis lazuli, amethyst, turquoise, labradorite and aquamarine. Lots of deep blues and expansive celestial colours. For incense, one traditional recipe uses crushed juniper berries, cedar wood shavings, pine gum, oil of cedar and oil of clove. So we're in rich, woody, resinous territory. A bit like walking into a temple, a forest and a spice cupboard all at the same time. Or you can just buy some Jupiter incense and save yourself the hassle. You can also make the magical square if you like, just a 4x4 grid, so it's not too taxing at the moment. So it's Thursday, you've lit your blue candle and got your juniper berries smouldering away. You're wearing your turquoise sapphire encrusted underpants and you've got the Wheel of Fortune card and a tin of beans in front of you. Now it's time to focus on your intention, starting with something like, may this work open the way to wise growth, meaningful opportunity and generous abundance. Or if you prefer the more direct approach, please help me expand in a way that doesn't immediately become a massive pain in the arse. Speak your intention clearly, write it down on a piece of paper and pop it away somewhere so you can keep it with you. Now you can just sit quietly and admire your blue candle while you think about how Jupiter is going to help you to grow. When you're ready, you can close the ritual by saying something like, by the power of Jupiter, this work is sealed with expansion, opportunity and wisdom. Then give it a week and the following Thursday have a think about how it's going. Maybe you've stopped crossing the street to avoid the charity muggers, or maybe you're now massaging feet all the way from Cannock to South Cannock. Congratulations, Jupiter has smiled upon your bunions. So that's just a simple working you can do, but you can make it much more sophisticated if you really want to get that Jupiter current flowing. Another thing you can do is wear some of that energy with a gorgeous blue bracelet from Otter Spirit. They've got gemstones that match every one of the planets, and for Jupiter that includes blue apatite, turquoise, lapis lazuli and sky blue jade. Links and discount codes in the description.
Kirby's Quest, Kirby's Quest.
So that's Jupiter, warm, generous and roughly the size of God's beach ball. He's the part of life that says,
Come on, try it. You only live once.
and thank the gods for that, because without Jupiter, life gets very small. We stop taking chances and looking for meaning. We stop believing that things can improve, that doors can open, that the world is bigger than the little patch of ground we've been pacing around on. But Jupiter also reminds us that growth needs wisdom. More is not always better. More money can mean more responsibility. More opportunity can mean more emails to respond to. More confidence can mean starting a podcast about cheese and then wondering why your family has stopped inviting you round to things.
I will not hear a word against cheddar through time and space.
So perhaps Jupiter's real gift isn't just luck or abundance or cheerful sky god enthusiasm. It's the courage to grow in the right direction, to become broader without becoming bloated, generous without becoming reckless, hopeful without becoming completely detached from the ground. Jupiter might open the door, but we still have to choose which door to walk through, and whether we really need to take 3 suitcases, a trumpet, and a ceremonial bread basket.
But those are all essential items.
If you say so. Anyway, join us next week when we'll be putting Jupiter through all 12 signs and houses, because one enormous gas giant was never going to be enough. And after that, we'll be moving on to Mars. So enjoy the generosity while it lasts, because soon someone won't be opening the door, they'll be kicking it off its hinges. For now, I'm going to leave you with this quote from William Butler Yeats. He said, "Happiness is neither virtue nor pleasure, nor this thing nor that, but simply growth. We are happy when we are growing."
Thank you for joining us on this expansive trip around Jupiter. May your fortunes rise, your wisdom grow, and your blessings be manageable. Until next time.